Can Austin Corbett make the smooth transition from guard to center? We'll talk about it right here on Locked On Panthers.
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, as always, Julian Council, talking Carolina Panthers right now with you every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday as it's still off-season mode here on the show. But beginning on July 15th, we're back to your team every day, which, of course, is our motto here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Subscribe or follow the show for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, on Twitter at Julian Council, where on July 26th, I'll be back answering your weekly Friday mailbag questions. So either at me or DM me when the time comes to be a part of the weekly Friday mailbag right here on Locked On Panthers. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. We wrap up the offense today on our final edition of the positional breakdowns. Look at the Carolina Panthers offense. We talk about the quarterbacks, talk about Bryce Young. Can Dave Canales save Bryce Young and get the most out of the 2023 number one overall pick? We talk about the running backs. Is this going to be a breakout season for Chuba Hubbard? He's gone from being Christian McCaffrey's fill-in to being RB2 behind Deontay Foreman to taking over the number one role last year to now being RB1 heading into training camp. Talk about wide receivers, Deontay Johnson, big trade by Dan Morgan to bring him to Carolina. Can he be that true number one wide receiver for the Panthers? Got the tight ends, Jatavion Sanders. I feel like we have finally found a replacement to Greg Olsen. Will he live up to the billing? Maybe not this year, but down the road. Then also looked at the offensive tackles on Wednesday. Icky, we need you, buddy, to play a lot better than you did last year. Can Ike Ekwonu reestablish himself as the Panthers franchise left tackle? On today's show, we're talking about the interior of the offensive line. We're talking about guards. We're talking about centers. And we're going to start off by talking about Austin Corbett, the biggest story about the biggest name at the position. And there's probably bigger names like Robert Hunt and Damien Lewis, who we are going to talk about momentarily. But the guy who's been around for a couple years now, who was really good for Carolina back during the 2022 season, who's now transitioning from being a guard to center, is Austin Corbett. And looking at the snap count, and this comes from Pro Football Focus, Austin Corbett has played 3,442 total snaps at right guard in the NFL. He has played 542 snaps at left guard. He has played 0 snaps in the NFL at center. Now, it's not the first time that Austin Corbett has played center. Actually, prior to his final year in Los Angeles with the Rams, when they won the Super Bowl, he had to fill in during the voluntary portion of the offseason at center. And he has said, too, that he's kind of been groomed to play center his entire career. Austin Corbett, when asked back during OTAs this year in Carolina, he asked about just the move to center. He said, it's been fine. I've been groomed to be a center my entire career, kind of even starting back in college at Nevada. Played every game at left tackle, but my coach, Bill Polian, said, if you're going to play in the league, you're going to be a good center. You're too good not to. I've been the emergency center on every team I've been on. I was a starting center going to the Super Bowl year back in 21 through training camp, and then ended up shifting around. It's nothing new by any stretch of the imagination. So nothing new by any stretch of the imagination, but also kind of new in terms of he's actually got to do it. And to be the starting center for Los Angeles all the way through training camp until he decided that made more sense for them to have Brian Allen in that spot, to have him playing right guard, and that led to them winning a Super Bowl. And having Matthew Stafford also helped a lot in the defense that they had and all the players like Aaron Donald. But still, the Rams felt for the best for the team to be in contention for a Super Bowl that they needed Austin Corbett at right guard. But it's nice to know, though, that he spent that much time, which is more than I had suspected. I had talked to Jordan Rodriguez, who covers the Rams for The Athletic, asking her, she remembered what the kind of situation was, and she had told me OTAs. So there we go, Austin Corbett, 2 minutes after I'd said in OTAs, correcting me and saying in training camp. But still, there's good to know that he has the experience. But will it be a smooth transition? When you have over 4,000 snaps at guard and 0 in the regular season at center, there's still going to be a period of time where it takes for him to get up to speed at the position once the regular season begins. But I'm not all that concerned about him being an effective center for the Carolina Panthers. You look at his numbers since he's been in Carolina. And last year, he was limited to 4 games after an ACL tear suffered in week 18 of the 2022 season. Before he suffered that injury, he was arguably the Panthers' best offensive lineman right there with Taylor Moton. And that was an offensive line group that looked solid. And heading into last season, I hoped with all of them coming back and eventually Corbett, whenever that would be, coming off of PUP with the ACL, that the Panthers offensive line would be the strength of the roster. With him not being around, the offensive line really struggled. And even when he came back, he really struggled. His PFF grades 2023 in those 4 games. Overall grade was 47.9, pass blocking grade 44.5, run blocking grade 51.0. He was a shell of himself. But in 2022, when he was arguably the Panthers' best offensive lineman, overall grade 69.1. His pass blocking grade, 76.2, which you definitely need at center position to not have that kind of penetration up the middle, where that's why the Panthers brought in Damien Lewis and Robert Hunt at the left and right guard spots to really protect Bryce Young up the middle, to go that Drew Brees kind of philosophy that the Saints went and had when he was there in New Orleans. Run blocking grade, 62.6. All those grades, by the way, for Austin Corbett were better than his final season with the Rams in 2021 when the Rams won a Super Bowl, except for the run blocking grade. It was 67.4 in Los Angeles, 62.6 in 2022 here in Carolina. But overall, he was a better player at that right guard spot in Carolina in 2022 than he was his final season in LA. And looking at it also overall, you just look at his numbers as far as snaps, 985 snaps, 2 penalties, 2 sacks allowed, 2 hits allowed, 15 total pressures allowed. Really good. And compare that to the guys who played center for Carolina in 2022, Bradley Bozeman and Pat Elflein. They played 1,018 snaps, 4 penalties, so twice as many penalties, 3 sacks allowed, so 1 more sack allowed, 3 hits, so 1 more hit allowed, 19 pressures. So he played at guard kind of right there, a little bit better, but kind of on par than what the Panther centers gave them back in 2022. So I think Austin Corbett could be a really good center for Carolina. And to hear that dating back to even his time in college, that his coach felt like he could be the guy to stay at center in his career, that is a good thing. And let's look at Austin Corbett's age too right now as I kind of quickly do a Google search of him. He's going to be 29 in September, and the Panthers have been waiting the last couple of years. They tried Matt Paradis. They tried out Elflein. They tried out Bradley Bozeman, who I really felt like was a good signing for them last year after he had a solid year in 2022, and that did not work out in the new blocking scheme last year. They've tried the free agency guys, and they have not worked out. Now, Corbett is also a free agency guy, but he came to play right guard. Now, with a different coaching staff here, they see him more as a center, and they think that he can make that transition. And Dave Canales talked about just how vocal that Austin Corbett is. And Austin Corbett makes more sense as a center if he's going to be that vocal, knowing that you get to call protections. And Bryce Young needs a veteran in that spot. And he has a veteran player, maybe not a veteran at the position, but still, that was something clearly Carolina wanted to go out there and get this past offseason. Lloyd Cushenberry from Denver ended up in Tennessee, was a name that the Panthers are really going after. He got paid a decent amount of money to go to the Titans, and the Panthers they went after him, just didn't have the money to pay him, especially knowing that they're going to spend a lot on the guard spots, which they did with Robert Hunt and Damien Lewis. I think this is a good decision by Carolina, and I think it can really work out well for Bryce Young and for the offense moving forward. Austin Corbett, think he absolutely can fill the role as a quality center, and maybe gets a new contract this season and can stay there for the next 3+ years as starting center here in Carolina and give the Panthers an opportunity to maybe draft and develop somebody down the line. So there we go. Austin Corbett can be your starting center. What about the rest of the interior offensive line depth? Robert Hunt, Damien Lewis, are they the keys to the Carolina Panthers' offensive success in 2024? Brady Christensen, what is his role? Cade Mays, Chandler Zavala, can they bounce back after really struggling last year? We'll talk about all that here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets the first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, their lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes the work out of buying MLB tickets. And honestly, going to be down in Georgia for vacation coming up here in the next week and think about stopping down in Atlanta to go check out the Braves. And the best place to save up to 60% off buying the last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc. is, of course, Game Time. Get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL. That's LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, so Austin Corbett is set to be the Carolina Panthers starting center in 2024. We'll see how all that shakes out. What does the rest of the interior offensive line depth chart look like? Starting at the left and right guard spots. Last year was a travesty. You had 7 different left guards, 8 different right guards, and I think we stated that 200 times. It should be seared into your minds. Let's start off with the right guard spot. Who's replacing Austin Corbett? And when this came out, I wondered what's going to happen with Austin Corbett. We got that answer pretty shortly thereafter, but Robert Hunt comes over from Miami, where he was with the Dolphins last couple of seasons, signing a 5-year, $100 million contract with $63 million guaranteed, of which $44 million is fully guaranteed. So you make of that what you will. $63 million, they're going to guarantee him. He's going to be, at the very least, a starting right guard in Carolina for the next 3 seasons. And last season in Miami, a little banged up, had a hamstring injury, played 547 snaps at right guard in 11 games. His PFF overall grade was a 77.1, making him the 6th best offensive lineman in the interior at a 79 eligible. Pass blocking grade 74.5, 10th out of 77 eligible interior offensive lineman. Run blocking grade 75.9, 10th out of 79 eligible interior offensive linemen. So the Panthers are spending $100 million. 63 of it is guaranteed. 44 of that is fully guaranteed on a top 10 player at the guard position from last season. Seems like a job well done to me, Dan Morgan. He allowed 5 total pressures, 1 hit, 1 sack, and was penalized 2 times in 2023. Yeah, that's exactly what you want. When you talk about moving Ike Ekwonu into guard and you don't do it, that is the kind of signing that you need to make in order to have people feel at ease and that you are making the right steps towards being a competitive team in 2024 and protecting your quarterback and giving Bryce Young a chance. So Robert Hunt is going to come in, and the expectation with that is for him to be a Pro Bowl caliber player. He has not been a Pro Bowler or an All-Pro. Neither has Taylor Moton. The Taylor Moton has been the beacon of consistency here in Carolina. We need Robert Hunt to, at the very least, be on the field, be consistent, but with $100 million in what was expected to be a high-priced guard market, where he made out like a bandit, we need him to play at a Pro Bowl type of level to really justify that amount of money. Damien Lewis, who will play at left guard, replacing Brady Christensen and the plethora of guys who played there at left guard last year and keeping Icky out there at tackle on the left side. He signed a 4-year, $53 million deal with $26.2 million fully guaranteed. So to recap, the Panthers have given out $153 million to the starting guard positions here across the next 4 to 5 seasons, with $89.2 million of it guaranteed. That's a lot of moolah to give out to some guards at a spot where traditionally guards don't really make that much money. You're paying centers, you're paying tackles, haven't really been paying guards. We found out that is a spot where a lot of people are focused on, knowing that the pressure from the interior, from these just absolute monsters playing defensive tackle nowadays, it is of utmost importance to have someone in the interior, not just someone, but some bodies who can get up there and can help road grade. And you got 2 guys who are both 330 pounds. Damien Lewis last year coming from Seattle, and this is a name back during the free agency period we had talked about. This guy would make a lot of sense. Panthers brought in the Seahawks assistant line coach, so it would make a lot of sense for him to come over here. He understands the scheme, what's going to be asked of him. Last season in Seattle, his overall PFF grade 59.6. That was 37th out of 79 offensive guards. Pass block grade 63.0. That was 30th. Run block grade 57.9. That was 46th. And the numbers aren't overwhelming, in particular for a player who's getting $53 million and $26.2 fully guaranteed. And really, to break that down, it's 2 years, $26 million, where Hunt is 3 years, 63 at the very least. You're hoping that these guys are going to be your starting guard combination for the next 4 years, maybe even beyond that. As Damien Lewis is a guy signing his first contract or second contract, same thing with Hunt. They're right there in the prime of their careers and could anchor the Panthers offensive line for the next handful of years, if not beyond that. You look in the past, though, where Lewis has been a 4-year starter in Seattle, which is great to have. He had a 72.5 overall grade back in 2022, where he was 11th highest graded offensive guard. And then you look at 2020, he was 71.2. He was the 13th highest rated offensive guard. So he's had years where he's been one of the top 15 at his position. And there's been years where he's been just kind of like middle of the road. So middle of the road, the top 15 definitely beats what the Panthers had to deal with last year. And when you look at Brady Christensen, he was better than what Christensen was the last time he started in 2022. So Lewis and Hunt, I look at those two guys as obviously marquee free agent signings, but they need to be really good, if not great, for Carolina this year, as they want to run the football. Dave Canales talked about being stubborn about doing that, and they need to be able to protect Bryce Young. And in order to do that, you need Hunt, you need Lewis, and you need Corbett all on the field, healthy together, but also playing at their best. And I think the Panthers are situated with the offensive line, especially the interior, to be a team that can compete. Last year, they didn't have a chance. This year, as long as Hunt and Lewis and Corbett stay healthy, they have a chance. And if something happens to them, enter Brady Christensen, a guy who has started for you before. In 2022, he started every game, playing 965 snaps, had 11 penalties, 2 sacks allowed, 17 pressures, played every snap until he broke his leg in that final game in Week 18 against New Orleans, the same game where Austin Corbett tore his ACL. And looking at that season, where the Panthers really went down to a ground and pound kind of a rushing attack on offense. They're going to be run first and try and do some play action off of that with Sam Darnold as their quarterback, getting them to 6-6 in the final half of the year, and right there in contention to win the NFC South in Tampa. Christensen was solid, but he was also their lowest graded offensive lineman that season. 57.3 overall PFF grade, 68.8 pass blocking grade, 53.3 run blocking grade. Now you look at that and you look at what Damien Lewis did last year with 59.6, 63, and a 57.9. You're probably saying to me, Julian, is that really an upgrade? Well, when I brought up the fact that Damien Lewis has had a 72.5 overall grade and a 71.1 overall grade, those are grades that Brady Christensen has never seen so far in his career. Didn't get a lot of opportunities. His rookie year in 2021, they played him all over the offensive line, didn't find a home in 2022. Then last year, gets injured, and now he's in a position where he's going to be the backup at guard. He's also going to be the primary backup at center. And I think if something happens where Yosh Nijman is already starting at left tackle or right tackle, and Moton, or God forbid, Ike Ekwonu, both those guys go down, I would think Brady Christensen has the ability to play tackle. And that is better depth than Carolina had last year. You now have 2 stalwarts, hopefully. Got to get the left tackle getting work, figuring his stuff out in Ike Ekwonu. But you got 2 guys at tackle who you can potentially trust. One of them definitely. You have another guy who started in the league at tackle in Green Bay, and Yosh Nijman. And then you look at your interior. You have Corbett, who can play center. You got 2 guys in Lewis and Hunt, who are coming in to be starting centers. Then you have Brady Christensen, who can play all 3 positions and has already been a starter at literally every position except for center so far in the NFL. That's a great spot to be in when it comes to your top 7 guys having played significant snaps and even having played pretty well, or at least to like a replacement level as far as when they've gone out there and gotten their opportunities. Much better than what you could say last year, where that was not necessarily the case for the Carolina Panthers. So I feel good about that top 7 and where they're at. Looking at the rest of them, when it comes to the depth part of it, we got Cade Mays, who played in 16 games last year, starting 5 of them. He saw 362 snaps at left guard, 71 snaps at right guard. His overall PFF grade was 58.3. That was 42nd out of 79 offensive guards. Pass blocking grade, 43.0. That was 67th out of 77. Run blocking grade, really good, 71.2. 15th out of 79. So not really great when it comes to protecting, but really good when it comes to just wanting to run the football. He had 4 penalties, 3 sacks allowed, 2 hits allowed, 21 total pressures. I look at him as a kind of a break glass in case of emergency kind of player who would be the second guard you'd call upon to start for you if you are in a pinch. And hopefully that's not going to be the case. You can also use them. Maybe we can bring it back the Arby's package. Use them in some heavy sets if necessary. So Cade Mays, Going to be his third year, still a developmental player who can come in and help you out if need be. Chandler Zavala. Oh, man. Fourth round pick at NC State last year. He played a grand total of 5 games with Ike Ekwonu, which people were thinking, oh, they got a relationship. They do because they practice together. It's not like they played a lot together when they were both at State. Chandler last year was just, he was in over his head, was not ready to go. And the fact that you had Brady get injured, which no one saw, of course, happening week 1. You knew it was going to take some time for Corbett, which is why I believe they brought in Calvin Throckmorton, and they already knew they had Cade Mays. Then they had to go to Chandler Zavala, and it's so interesting to me how the narrative was heading into training camp last year that he was going to compete with Brady Christensen. And based off what he did last year, I don't think it would have been in competition at all. He played in 10 games, making 7 starts, allowed 6 sacks, 7 quarterback hits, and 33 pressures. My goodness. He also was injured at the end of the season with a knee injury. 26.2 overall PFF grade, had a 7.1 pass blocking grade, including a 0.0 grade versus Seattle. Young player in a position where just needs development. Needs way more development than he does need snaps on game day. The good thing is he's had snaps on game day. But now it's time for Harold Goodwin and Joe Gilbert just to get this guy ready to one day play in the NFL. The way that the Panthers have doled out these contracts, the expectation is not for him to be a starter here, but to be a backup and to play if necessary. What's really give this guy a redshirt year to not even see him out on the field if he even makes a team and not have him be pressed into duty. Another guy who was pressed into duty last year was Nash Jensen, the undrafted free agent out of North Dakota State, played in 11 games last year, starting 5. He was benched back-to-back weeks later on in the season for Gabe Jackson. Overall PFF grade, 34.7. Pass blocking grade, 33.7. Run blocking grade, 38.6. Wasn't great at all. Played 302 snaps, 222 of which were at right guard, 80 at left guard. Was penalized once, sacked 1 sack allowed, 2 hits allowed, 18 pressures allowed. And looking at his pass rushing snaps, and with the 18 pressures allowed, he gave a 10.5 pressure percentage. 1 out of 10 pass blocking snaps, he was giving him a pressure. That is hellacious. So Nash Jensen, like the rest, just needs to be a guy who gets some time to learn and to get an opportunity down the road. JD Dorenzo, UDFA out of Boston College last year, played in 3 games late in the 2023 season, logged 6 offensive snaps and 8 special team snaps. And then the final guy, Andrew Raum from Oklahoma, UDFA, started 29 out of 43 games in his career at OU, all 29 starts at center. Last season, he was second team all Big 12 selection by the league's coaches, and really the only kind of like true center on the roster. Now, Corbett's been groomed that way. Christensen's getting snaps there. But as far as guys who have played center in college and now are entering into the NFL as a center, that's Andrew. So we'll see if there's an opportunity for him to potentially make the roster here in Carolina. How many of these offensive linemen from the interior will the Panthers keep? We'll talk about that here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. So how many guards are the Panthers going to keep? How many centers are the Carolina Panthers going to keep? Breaking it down as I've been doing in tiers: guaranteed roster spots, roster bubble, practice squad guys. The guys who are guaranteed to make the roster, of course, the starters: Austin Corbett at center, Robert Hunt at right guard, Damien Lewis at left guard. Then I look at Brady Christensen and a guy who is going to be in a rough spot next time we're around here when we get to the offseason and heading into training camp, not training camp, but in free agency, because he's never really played at one spot. He played right guard all those times in 2022. He got to move around a lot in 2021 as a rookie. Hasn't really found a home. And now the Panthers are playing him at center. They're going to be playing him at guard as a backup, and then he could also play at tackle if necessary. It bodes well in terms of he's a guy who can be a swift army knife, jack of all trades, but also doesn't truly have a home entering into his 4th year in the NFL. So it's good for the Panthers to have a guy who they know can play all 3 positions on the offensive line. Not necessarily the best as far as like getting a lot of money and being a starter somewhere else down the road for Brady Christensen after this season, but because he can be all over the offensive line, he's a guy who's kind of indispensable and has to stay on the roster. So there are those 4. And I had on the show on Tuesday, I said there'd be 3 tackles. And I wondered the way with Brady Christensen, would that then kind of make it hard for Ricky Lee to make the roster like he did last year, knowing that Christensen could play that spot? Quite possibly. So there's 7 guys at a guard and tackle I have guaranteed on the roster. Roster bubble, Cade Mays, Chandler Zavala. Mays, I feel pretty good about him making it. He's at least good when it comes to run blocking, and he's been utilized in the past in some special sets. Zavala, a guy who just needs some time to really sit back and to get coached up. And I would rather have like Ricky Lee out there than I would have Chandler Zavala at this point in time. Practice squad guys, Nash Jensen, and that's what he was last year. I think he was going to be there again this year. Andrew Ram makes a lot of sense for him too. Be a practice squad guy, and then JD Dorenzo, who was that as well. I think if Zavala doesn't make it, I think really going to be a practice squad guy. But 9 are probably going to make the roster. So Corbett, Hunt, Lewis, Christensen. I'll go Mays. And then, because Zavala was a draft pick, the kind of politics of that will allow him likely to make the roster. Don't think he's a guy who's getting a uniform at all this season, unless just things are catastrophic once again, injury-wise, for the offensive line. So there it is, 53-man roster projections for the interior of the Carolina Panthers offensive line heading into training camp. All right, that's going to wrap up this edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, hosted by yours truly, Julian Council. Again, y'all subscribe, follow the show for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And coming up on Monday, going to do an episode just looking back at the entire offense as a whole, the state of the Carolina Panthers offense. And the key question I have the Panthers done enough to help Bryce Young? What are the strengths, what are the weaknesses of this team? And what are the realistic expectations that you and I should have for the Panthers offense heading into 2024 with Dave Canales as a new head coach and offensive play caller? We'll talk about all that on Monday. But in the meantime, be safe, be happy, be whole, as always and forever. Keep pounding, and I'll talk to y'all on Monday.